Good morning, beautiful people. I am Vicky Jeter, your practitioner, spiritual director for Louisville Center for Spiritual Living teaching chapter. And I want to welcome you to the first week of April. This is a vital, powerful time of year, a tremendous period of sacred holidays, and it's our joy to share some of those with you today. So in honor of this being such a special time, you may notice this morning that parts of our service are slightly unique. And so as that happens, just know it's a part of honoring this very special time. And so right now is our time for setting intention, individually and together. So I invite you to just take a few moments yourself to set your intention for being here today. Just set all that you see around you aside and drop in and see what brought you here today. And our shared intention today is an opportunity to appreciate the value and importance of preparation. And our new theme for April that we'll be going through overall is the power of vulnerability. And actually, by divine timing, there is a way that these two things come together that I didn't even realize until I really got into what we were working with. And that's going to be some fun. And so now, let us begin with opening prayer. And we begin our prayers in gratitude for all that is. The very first thing, thank you. Thank you, Spirit, for the gift of this day. Thank you for the gift of life that opens up the package for adventures and opportunity for good and more good in our lives. I recognize it. I recognize it as here present in omnipresence, omniscience, and omnipotence, knowing that that presence is always. This process that we do called affirmative prayer and centering and all of the practices that we do spiritually doesn't change spirit. It changes us. It allows us to shift our position in relationship to spirit that makes anything possible. And so today, I know that as we open this time, we open ourselves in mind, heart, and soul to give and receive that which is ours to give and receive, trusting in that divine right process and action. And I know that as we do this, it brings us in touch with vulnerability and the power of preparation and how those two things work together to bring us forward into authenticity, to bring us forward into developing the world that we know can work for everyone. And so I let it be, and so it is. And so we do welcome each and every one of you here wholeheartedly to Louisville Center for Spiritual Living teaching chapter. Whether you're with us here for the first time this morning or watching later on Zoom, we thank you for your presence today because you are what we're about. We start each of our days by greeting God, the angels, LCSL as a community, and each and every one of you before we even get here in the morning. Vernon and I set up and light the God candle, which I'm well aware you guys can't see today because of the lilies, but the God candle is there behind me. And just know that you are welcome no matter what faith you grew up in, no matter what path of life you've been on, or what you were taught to believe, you are welcome here. And now, we're going to start with opening song, and this song was actually recorded at the Vista conference, which some of us attended in March. And the musician, Denise Rosier, is actually the head musician for all of Centers for Spiritual Living, and she talks about that a little bit as the song opens. And this song is Spirit is in This Place.
Hey everybody, it's Denise Rosier. Welcome to this time of singing together and reconnection here at Vista. The words are going to be right there at the bottom of your screen, and so I invite you to sing along with me. Spirit is definitely in this place, right here, wherever we are. Spirit is always among us because we bring it. So we're going to raise the roof with shouts of praise. Are you ready? We have come together as a family. We have come here as we are. Yes, we have. We have come with arms wide open. We have gathered here in love. Spirit is in this, Spirit is in this place. Spirit is in this, Spirit is in this place. Spirit is in this, Spirit is in this place. Raise the roof with shouts of praise. Spirit's in this place. We sing in celebration. We sing with words of praise. We sing with words of praise. We affirm our life as sacred. We declare that peace is here. Yeah, yeah. Spirit is in this, Spirit is in this place. Ooh. Spirit is in this, Spirit is in this place. Spirit is in this, Spirit is in this place. Raise the roof with shouts of praise. Spirit's in this place. Let's sing it together. Spirit is in this, Spirit is in this place. Ooh. Spirit is in this, Spirit is in this place. Spirit is in this, Spirit is in this place. Raise the roof with shouts of praise. Raise the roof with shouts of praise. Spirit's in this place. Spirit is definitely in this place.
Oh my goodness, too much fun. So before we move into our mission and vision today, I want to take special time as a part of the foundation for this service to recognize it's Palm Sunday in traditional Christianity, and this week is the beginning of Passover in Judaism. So this week between Passover and Sunday and Easter is what is known as Holy Week in Christianity. And Passover is on what is called a lunar calendar. For Jewish culture, is a calendar that actually falls 11 days shorter than what is called our Gregorian calendar, which is the calendar that we commonly use for our everyday lives. So for that reason, Passover dates change every year. And so this year, between March and April in 2023, Passover runs from the evening of April the 5th through the evening of April the 13th. And so then Holy Week for Christianity is this week, starting today on Palm Sunday up until Easter Sunday. Next slide, please, Vernon. Now, at this point of a multicultural interest in faiths having more in common than we have differences, you may recall our closing song last week for March was performed by the children's choir, and they were participating in the Hindu festival of Holi. Notice Holy Week, Holy Festival, and see if this sounds like anything like what we do. The Holi Festival is celebrated as a way to welcome in spring, and is also seen as new beginnings where people can release their inhibitions and the things that they wish they hadn't had happen the year before and start new, start fresh. So it's said that during the Holi Festival, the gods turn a blind eye. And it's one of the few times that extremely devoted Hindus are allowing themselves to just let loose. And that's why when you saw in the video of the kids, they were dancing and doing all the colors, and those colors that they do are very much correlated to why we color the Easter eggs. And so here we have all three holidays, Passover and Palm Sunday and Easter, are all and the celebration of Holi, the heart there that you see, that's a Holi cookie that they do. All of those actually have the same origin and in antiquity. And this slide that you see actually comes off of a website called Indian Life, like from India. Okay, and so even they're recognizing that actually all three of these holidays that are talking about letting go of what was in the cycle of life and moving into the springtime, all originally came from exactly the same place in antiquity. And let's see, letting go of the long winter, and it's a sense of hailing back to all of the societies in ancient times came from the same thing. And then as time goes on, especially as generations move, differences happen, and kind of it expands out into all these different things, because it's hard for generations to remember exactly why we did what we did. And that's one of the most important things about passing on culture, because if we don't pass on why we're doing what we're doing, people make changes, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the more consciously we can do it, the more effective it is for what its purpose is. And I was just so excited when I found this particular slide. And so now we will move on to our normal pattern and rhythm with our mission and vision statement, which is our mission is to teach personal transformation as a virtual community, living the principles of science of mind, and celebrating all paths to God. And our vision statement, a world that honors and respects all people. So, as we're learning, spiritual living is only as good as we can relate to it, only as good as it actually applies. So we have an application of what we believe each week, and these are to be put into practice and to give something to connect with and talk about with our community or with our families. And this week, our application of what we believe is, let's take a breath and say this together. This is really powerful, especially given the topic that we're coming into for vulnerability. We are at our most powerful moment when we no longer need to be powerful. And so for our sacred reading and meditation this morning, we have Miss Bev Iyengar.
Good morning. Our reading today comes from the Science of Mind magazine, and Eugene Holden. It's the affirmation page, and I'm going to use the text from that page as our reading. The power of vulnerability. To be vulnerable is to be totally honest with yourself and others, opening up completely, exposing your inner being to the world. It takes courage to accept the emotional risk that comes from being open to love unconditionally. Making the commitment to be this open and honest with ourselves has the potential to crack us wide open. When we allow this to happen, we no longer live life for ourselves. We live it for the divine. Being one with the divine means letting go of everything that doesn't serve this purpose. The eternal truth is that you are the way Spirit shows up in the world. Surrender to that. Being vulnerable is having the willingness to be seen. After all, that's why you're here, to shine the light of the infant. Do not shy away from your light. There are others who need you to show the way. I invite you now to our meditation, which will be an inner healing experience. Some of you may have had this experience before and will recognize it as we share it, and for others of you, it will be the first time. Please join us. Settle in to that contemplative spot for yourself. Universal love enfolds me. Universal wisdom inspires me. Universal spirit enlightens me. Universal power encircles me. I am one, and all is well. So together we will begin this inner healing process. Let me invite you to close your eyes and relax in quiet confidence, opening yourself to the miracle working higher power. Now symbolize the unity of your thinking and feeling nature by touching your chest with your right hand, and let my words act as your own for your own inner acceptance and receptivity. I acknowledge that there is a power, intelligence, and wisdom greater than my own. I am in the midst of it, and it is in the midst of me, sensitive and responsive to my every thought, word, action, and feeling. I now make this true for myself by saying aloud, I acknowledge. Acknowledging this higher power working through my life, I admit that I am personally responsible for solving my own problems while being guided and assisted by something greater than myself. As I'm ready to surrender the conflicts of my ego to the wisdom of the infinite presence, I simply speak these words. I surrender. Knowing that forgiveness is the key to unconditional love and the kingdom of heaven, I now unconditionally forgive anyone and everyone who has ever injured me in any way, real or imagined. I now forgive myself for all my mistaken judgments and their resulting actions. From my deepest level of understanding, now I say, I forgive. Realizing that I continually experience the effects of my own thinking, I now choose to let this higher power to recreate me deeply, filling my mind with thoughts that are only constructive, positive, loving, and beautiful. I call upon this divine flow by saying aloud, I choose. I now center upon one special idea that I'm willing to accept as real for me in this coming week. Visualizing the idea as already acted upon and brought to pass. In seeing my idea become a fact of my experience, I enjoy the happiness and the peace of my thought fulfilled. And I gratefully speak these words. I accept. Knowing that I have an everlasting place in the midst of the power that sustains all creation, as well as support of all those around me, I allow myself to relax in the peace and fulfillment and gratitude. And I close by saying, I release. Come back with us. And as you release these words into the law, which always says yes, thank you for joining me in this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Bev. That was beautiful. And now it is our very special pleasure to welcome our own Melba Harris, who is going to serenade us this morning with a song of her own penning. It's my favorite song of Melba's. It's called Dare to Dream. Take it away, Melba.
Thank you. I will dare to dream of what you want for me. My hopes and fears I now embrace, to live a life that's free. Free to believe that prosperity is mine. It's more than wishful thinking. It's a fact of the divine, and free to let go of the things that hold me down, so that in each waking moment I can see your grace above. I will dare to dream of what you want for me. My hopes and fears I now embrace, to live a life that's free. Divine creator of the world, life giver to my soul, help me to remember that you have made me whole. So my journey starts today, like many days before. Peace, love, and joy are the wings upon which my spirit soars. So I dare to dream of what you want for me. My hopes and fears I now embrace, to live a life that's free. I will dare to dream of what you want for me. My hopes and fears I now embrace, to live a life that's free. My hopes and fears I now embrace, to live a life that's free.
Oh my goodness. Let's just take 2 breaths. Just really let that sink in. If we could, Melba, I would be standing. I would be standing and asking for an encore. That was so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. So, as you can see, this is our slide that kind of recaps everything that's happening within the message. I just want to say, before I even do that, though, on the trailing of this beautiful serenade, you know, when Melba and I got together to see what perfect timing would be, we knew some things about what would be going on, and we had to juggle, you know, oh, well, there's this happening and this is happening, and do we think it actually fits for Easter Sunday? And no, and this and that and the other. And so we landed on today. But I have to tell you guys that, so I'm going to kind of blend these two things together. So as we know, our theme for this year, 2023, is living out loud, which is about just being ourselves, being out there without having to apologize for it. And our theme for April, as you guys are learning now, is the power of vulnerability. And I just have to tell you that this line, that last line of that song, is what I would like to invite you guys to see if you can let sink in to your soul level. My hopes and fears I now embrace to live a life that's free. So when we're talking about the power of vulnerability and how vulnerability allows for the freedom to be authentic, this is exactly what we're talking about. Embracing both our hopes, our visions, our intentions, and our fears equally is part of what makes this whole thing happen. And I almost feel like we could just say amen right there. She just gave us the whole message for today. But we shall move on and see what else is here for us. Let's see here. Now I have to get back to where I need to be. So nationally, we were encouraged as we launch into the exploration of the power of vulnerability to begin with a key step of defining vulnerability and gaining clarity around just what vulnerability actually is and why it's important. So we'll be exploring what often gets in the way of being vulnerable and what steps we can take to navigate the path of vulnerability, because it's a key to our own personal transformation, and it creates an expanded awareness of what lies just beneath the surface. Remember, a few weeks ago, we talked about what lies beneath the surface. And so this is actually an application of that as well. And as we look at vulnerability through this lens, we begin to realize how vulnerability is a building block for thriving relationships and healthy community. So we start with ourselves, and then as each of us gets more comfortable with dancing with life this way, as we come together in community, it makes the whole thing that much more thriving. And for anyone who was with us last week was a beautiful example of what is being said right there. Because, you know, Mitch Austin, who was our speaker, he really built such a container of safety for us all to share by the end of that message. And what's true is our practice of having that sharing time, we didn't even know someone like Mitch Austin would be coming along to really open up the door of how to be authentic and just be out there. But the practice that we've had of coming together and sharing as community, with everyone having the option of voice or expressing in the chat and all of that, was actually preparation for what Mitch brought us. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that. So whenever we embark on a new adventure, it is important to know where we are and where we're going. So today we begin the journey towards a greater understanding of the power of vulnerability by exploring what it is, what it isn't, and why it's important. Vulnerability becomes a crucial starting point for authenticity, not only with ourselves, but also in connection with others. And so to the extent that we can be vulnerable with ourselves and demonstrate that, as Mitch did last week, we begin to invite others to do the same with us. So Ernest Holmes says, every one of us has in back of us the potential of the universe. And it's not really that spirit is like in back of us. It's like spirit having your back. Like imagine that the whole power of the universe has your back, has a guiding hand on your shoulder to say you can do this. There is an irresistible potential pressing against everyone for self-expression. If we listen, we shall hear it, not as a voice, but as a feeling, as the divine urge to express, which has been identified as how oneness came into multiplicity to start with. It's just this divine urge to express. This points to the understanding that the reality of our essence is the ability to express fully the life within us. Just as we observe the movement of growth and vitality in the natural world, Such is the blueprint for our lives. Each of us has a law of our own nature that is pressing to be expressed. When we are limited and unable to express ourselves fully, the effects are far reaching. It touches everything about who we are and what we're doing. In a world that often seeks to contain or suppress our true expression, vulnerability becomes an integral piece of actualizing the spirit within us. The willingness to take the risk of being authentic, living authentically, although doing so may open up challenges along the way, and being willing to navigate it anyway, being willing to navigate the mystery, navigate what we don't even know that might end up being hard, leads us to the very outpicturing of the irresistible potential within us all. And actually, Melba also just demonstrated that for us. I don't know anybody who thinks about singing a cappella and just says, oh yeah, that's easy to do with no music behind you. What is it somebody on The Voice said, that singing a cappella is like standing on stage without any clothes on? You know, it's just you're just out there, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to have had that today. I'm so grateful. And so with our 4 points of discussion, the fourth point that we'll be talking about beyond why it's important is how to actually embody it for ourselves, how to move more toward the kinds of just being able to experience it. So what it is, in the beginning, the path towards an expanded understanding of vulnerability, it's important to start with a definition. This provides not only a point of reference, but a sense of clarity that will guide us in this conversation. Brene Brown, who's a researcher and professor of social work at the University of Houston, defines vulnerability as a state of emotional exposure that comes with a certain degree of uncertainty. It involves a person's willingness to accept the emotional risk that comes from being open and willing to love and be loved. To be vulnerable is to explore the depths of ourselves and others, even when we are unsure of what we might uncover or what might transpire in the relationship. It is stepping out, whether literally or metaphorically, often in the face of uncertainty and fear, for the purpose of fostering a fuller expression of ourselves and others. And so, you know, as you're listening to this, you might reflect on sometimes, because this comes up so often, you know, how far are we willing to go in opening our hearts up? How do we say what we need to say? You know, you might be thinking about some times where you tried and maybe you did experience some rejection. Maybe people didn't understand you or embrace you. You know, talking about mistakes you've made is one area that is difficult to deal with, and being vulnerable. But we know when we're able to name that humanity and get through it, then we feel freer, and the people around us know us better and have an opportunity to embrace whatever the mistake was and say together, how do we make it better? And this brings up everything that we've talked about around boundaries, how we know, like, where do we feel safe enough and where do we need to practice those shutters, you know? And so this brings us to talking a little bit about what vulnerability is not. Vulnerability is not weakness, and it's not about showing up and being seen as if we have no clothes on. It's not about just taking and opening up and saying, here I am, you know, come and get me. That isn't true vulnerability, because there isn't self-empowerment in that. And true vulnerability is actually a self-empowerment. And so the first thing about how to work vulnerability where it truly becomes an ally and becomes that which permits us to be even more authentic is to begin to examine areas in our lives where we have been resistant for whatever reason to being vulnerable. And as you recognize areas where you have some resistance, there again, it doesn't mean right away just, oh, I should just throw open the doors and windows. It's about saying to yourself, what would I need? to be internally safe enough myself to be out in the world and know that however the world's reaction is can't hurt me because I have myself. And we're going to talk about how knowing yourself and loving yourself, we've said many times in the past few months that that self relationship is the foundation of your relationship to spirit. And so when you have the strength of relationship to yourself, which is the gateway to a very strong relationship to spirit, when you have those things, then the effects of the world, we talk about cause and effect. So spirit is cause and worldly conditions are effect. You're not as subject to people's reactions and what people think and all of that when you know that the base of where you come from is you and God. And that's where the practice of things like the inner healing experience come in, because when we work that inner healing process on a regular basis, it keeps the field clear with ourselves. We know where we're at and who we are and what we need. And we know that spirit is our source. And when you have those two things, then is when it can truly be safe enough to do such as Melba has done this morning and Mitch did last week, where I can be before a crowd of people, 20, 30 people that I don't know, and just put it out there, because however they respond is their stuff. I don't have to take it personally, and I can just be who I am and have my experience. And so looking a little bit more about what it's not is kind of important. So when you get to the adventure of gaining the clarity and awareness of the connection and how it fuels our connection and authenticity, then also, such as what is very likely happening right now, we begin to recognize that as we have that courage, it then leverages the courage of the people that are with us, and so much more gets opened up. And it's one way to also augment then your relationships with your family, because if your family can see that you're moving into a place where it's safer to just say what's really happening, then also people have more of an opportunity to say what's happening for them. Now, vulnerability is also not dumping inappropriate amounts of emotional or personal history with wild abandon. It's not being vulnerable for the sake of saying, look at me over here, I'm being vulnerable with my stuff. The tone and motive of vulnerability in this sense is not that we are highlighting something. It is one that is born of the desire to fully be oneself for the purpose of deeper connection. And so it can still be done in pieces. It doesn't mean that you have to tell somebody something, and certainly not someone you're just meeting. If you're just meeting someone, it's very valuable to take a look at how much do I care to share in early parts of our relationship. And when you find the parts of yourself that you choose to hold back, it doesn't have to be because you're not willing to be vulnerable. That could be about maintaining that sense of mystery. Like when people don't know everything about you all at once, it's like, oh, that was really something. I want to know more about that person, and giving it that time so that the richness of that dynamic tension actually strengthens your sense of wanting to come together. And it is, there is some, there's some risk involved in that, because you don't know if something that you might say could trigger somebody or what have you, but their stuff is their stuff. And you don't have to worry about how your vulnerability is challenging someone. That's for them to take care of. That's for them to practice and maybe come and say, when this happened, it made me feel this way, and so it's all just a part of it. And that part about realizing that you don't have to let everybody know something all at once, that's part of not being a doormat. If we do just spill everything out there all at once and you don't know how somebody's going to take it, of course their response can end up making you feel like you've been trampled on, because we haven't told people where the buck stops. And we talked about that in the boxes, you know, letting people know, okay, this is my internal limit. I'm checking my internal limit, and that's going to be my external boundary. So what's true is all of these things that we've been talking about, they work together. They're all parts of the recipe of how this works. And no one of them, not the boxes and not the vulnerability, none of them are for all the time. Each of them has their own perfect time and place that they work. And when you know that, then they work together. So it's like, do I have the vulnerability card in my deck? Some people won't even put the vulnerability card in their deck consciously. They show up as vulnerable sometimes when they don't know themselves well enough. And that can be very difficult. But they don't yet know to say, yeah, I can be vulnerable by choice. And so that's part of what this opportunity is about, is to befriend vulnerability and find how it is that you can work with it. And so taking a breath, because I know that was a lot. Vulnerability becomes the necessary action in self-expression and deeper connection. And it doesn't mean that it's easy to do, but it's one of these kind of things where the more you practice it and the more it generally becomes a part of who you are, then it doesn't feel like such work, you know, because it's just part of what we do, like learning how to set boundaries. Setting boundaries initially feels very difficult to do because it's a whole new conversation, but after you've done it for a while, it just becomes part of who you are. And so hold on just a second. So I have an example of this to share from my own life, where I started out profoundly vulnerable, and over time I actually came into where I understood organically what this is. And this happened at a time in my life before I had ever gotten into the science of mind. I mentioned it some, I think last week or maybe the week before, when I was integrated from the handicap school that I was in for grade school. And when I got to the 7th grade, I was mainstreamed into regular school. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, when that first happened, I mean, I knew where I was coming from, but I had no idea where I was going to. And I was really vulnerable. And in this piece, I'm talking about how people would see me as opposed to how I really am, because the vulnerability that I was navigating at that time, I was on crutches, and I would carry my books in a satchel that I carried around my neck. And so it was extremely visible, because the books I would carry for my classes, I mean, they made me look 9 months pregnant, you know, and I 12 years old. And so you couldn't miss it. And everyone who saw me had some kind of impression. They didn't understand what was going on. These are all kids. Some of them have seen disabled people, some of them have not. And I had challenges, like I would slip and fall places. And the second day I was in class at this desk I was at, I pushed on the front of the desk to stand up to stabilize myself, and the desk fell over forward, and I fell on top of the desk, and nobody knew what to do. And so, you know, we were off and running. What I needed to learn to do is, because I know who I am, I needed to learn to, you know, the saying, someone else's opinion of me is none of my business. I really had to learn that people were going to think what they thought, and it didn't matter what they didn't understand if they didn't have the strength and the courage to come and ask me personally who I am and what I'm about and what's going on with me. And so the people that would approach me and develop connection, then they were able to get clear, and we were able to do this journey together. Me learning how to do public school and them learning how to help me integrate, which many of them did as they got to know me, you know, but it did take years. And so by the time I was in high school, by the time I graduated from high school, I was very clear and had little or no experiences where, you know, people were looking at me strange and all that kind of stuff. And so looking at how to embody vulnerability for yourself is that the foundation comes from it coming all together to work well, knowing it is an ongoing process. It's one of those things that's more of a permanent life change. It's not just where you're going to say, okay, well, now I'm going to be vulnerable. Like, you know, now you see it, now you don't. That strength is established by spiritual preparation that we do on a regular basis, such as using something like the inner healing process. When you prepare for the option to be vulnerable, then you're more ready. And I'm understanding more and more now about the power of preparation, because, you know, we've talked about recently how in meetings, really successful companies, they don't come together in a meeting and say, okay, let's attack a problem. They come in and they say, what's the question? What's the question that we're looking to answer? And when we know what the question is, the answer comes naturally. Well, that questioning thing, that is a period of preparation. And so when you're getting to know yourself around your boundaries or vulnerability, that's a period of preparation. If you think about it, like even something as simple as cooking a dinner, if you're a cook, you know that the more prepared you are going in to the actual cooking process, the more joyful and the more potentially successful it's going to be. And that is true of just about everything we do. When we do what lies underneath preparation, when we do that spiritual preparation, then when the opportunities come, it doesn't have to be, oh, like, what do I do now? Okay, now it's time to be vulnerable. And I hope that that makes some sense. And I do have just quickly one more story to tell you that is the most profound understanding of preparation that has happened. And I was so grateful about this because I get to tell you all an opportunity that's coming. This story comes from my work with my own birth story. And that's when I say the pre and perinatal part of what works in my belief system. That knowing where we come from, coming into being human, is so important to our story. So the person who has been my main mentor in that, his name is Dr. William Emerson. And the reason why I'm saying I'm excited about that timing wise is because William is going to come on May the 7th after church, and we're going to have an opportunity to just talk. It's not going to be a presentation thing, but he is going to be coming. Him and a woman named Suzanne Harrell will be here. And the example that I want to give you that comes from what I learned from working with him is that I knew when I was going to go to my first workshop about my birth, I knew that it was going to be life-changing potentially. And I had like 9 months between the time I knew I was going to that workshop and the time it actually happened. And every day I prayed and I said, God, I know this is a thing. I don't know what it is, but I know that this could be life-changing and I want to be ready. And I didn't do anything particular. I just prayed every day. I said, please make me ready to receive what this is. And this is what I'm saying. This is what I believe Holy Week is about. This is what I believe Passover is about. And, you know, Holly over in India, that understanding that when we prepare spiritually, then what happens in physical form doesn't have to be difficult and can be perfect according to the way that divinity has intended it for the highest and best. And so in conclusion, authenticity and meaningful connection are born out of vulnerability. Vulnerability allows us to build trust and intimacy in relationships, foster empathy and understanding, increase our sense of self-worth, build relationships with those who we serve or love in our lives, and bring us to work together in partnership in community. And to work through the process, again, is an ongoing thing. It's a one day at a time thing that happens as a permanent life change over time and can absolutely transform our actual experiences. So this week, spend some time in prayer and meditation contemplating about your comfort level with vulnerability. And wherever you are with it, it's fine. And as you begin to look at that, think about things like, when are times when I have been more vulnerable and it hasn't been as hard to do? Because those times can help you know what you need to do for the times that are more difficult. Are you aware of those times and when it's easier to be more authentic? And what are the differences to the times when it's difficult? And then I want to invite you, we're in a new month, so first Wednesday at 7 o'clock Wednesday, we will be talking about this more in depth. If you'd like to bring your challenges or your thoughts about it and talk about it Wednesday evening. And that is the close to this presentation. And I just want to invite us to take that pausing breath, settle in, and know that as we recognize there is one and only one, that this one is thrilling at the opportunities here present as we individually and collectively support each other in how to spread our wings farther and fly higher with what is possible as a spiritual being having a human experience. And as we are one with that source in mind, heart, and soul, I realize right here and right now that within each person, what is the potential of this is blossoming forth as I speak, as that new beginning, as that new life of spring. And I'm so grateful for this moment and the moments to come. Thank you, thank you, thank you, presence of life. I release it into the law, knowing it is done. I let it be, and so it is.
Thank you, Vicky. I'm going to move us forward at this time into that place of prosperity and thinking about your prosperity and asking you to consider our prosperity as a part of that, as a support system to you through the year. So we welcome your tithes, we welcome your donations, we welcome you into our prosperity affirmation for the day. As you can see, with spring in my heart, every area of my life is in full bloom. Let's say that together one time. With spring in my heart, every area of my life is in full bloom. And Vicky is right there to say thank you with her appreciation for you taking that opportunity.
And so I receive the word from Bev, knowing it is fulfilled in the cycle of circulation, that we absolutely know as we give, so we receive, and that this field of energy that we share in this moment literally is blossoming forth in all of our lives, for our center, and for the community around us. And I'm so grateful. Thank you, Mother, Father, God. I let it be, and so it is.
Bringing us to announcements. May I start, Vicky, and then ask your help?
Absolutely.
Tammy Ellis has been asking you to send her your mailing address if you were interested in participating in a small Easter surprise. So if you haven't done that and you think that might be a delight to you at this time of year, then be sure and send Tammy your email address. How do they know how to contact Tammy, Vicky?
The addresses for the emails of your practitioners and your board are in the very bottom of the weekly constant contact email that you receive, or just ask us.
Okay. And it seems that you've already talked about our first Wednesday connection. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Go ahead. Just very quickly, it's Wednesday evening on this Zoom at 7 o'clock this coming Wednesday, and we can absolutely move on.
Okay. Don't forget our men's group. Thursday, April the 6th is our upcoming time for that group to come together. On Sunday the 9th, officially Easter Sunday, our speaker is Vicky Jeter, and we are delighted to look forward to that opportunity. Oh, we're getting excited about one more activity. Have we talked to you about our pet blessing coming up? Tammy Ellis has done pet blessings in the past when they were not virtual. And she's put a lot of thinking into how to have folks have that opportunity to bring their pet to be blessed in a virtual opportunity. So start looking around for your favorite picture of that pet, be it as big as that beautiful rust-colored horse on the right-hand side of this picture, or that beautiful cat with, is that a tail in the back? On the other
No,
side
actually,
of this picture.
what you're
So-
seeing is a tail, I believe, is a little weasel there. Top corner is
Aha.
actually a weasel.
Okay. So we expect to see a lot of variety in what your choices might be in your sharing, and we're all looking forward to it. We do have a sharing time each week following our service, and we would encourage you to attend if you have the time for that. And don't forget, we are here to pray with you. If you are requesting prayer, come and stay with us for that sharing opportunity, and then I will certainly be available to support you in prayer. You are magnificent. Say that with me, with gusto and love in your heart. You
are magnificent.
That brings us to our closing song. Holy Now by Peter Mayer.
When I was a boy each week, on Sunday we would go to church and pay attention to the priest. He would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. And when I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two, and Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad. Miracles don't happen still. Now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small, but an even home. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips, but now I have to hold my breath like I'm swimming in a sea of it. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Child's face, say it's not a testament, that'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come, say it's not a sacrament, I tell you that it can't be done. This morning outside I stood, I saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush and singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then. Everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now.
Now for our simple benediction. Say this with me if it works for you. Now, in our lying down and in our rising up, in our rest and in our labor, in our tears and in our laughter, may the light of wisdom shine on our feet for ourselves and for others, now and forevermore. Amen.